Welcome to my anime recap. Like and subscribe for more. Lloyd was once mocked by nobles for being an ugly, disgusting loser with no talent. They saw him as a failure and ridiculed him endlessly. Eventually, they had enough and got rid of him, which led to his reincarnation as the most powerful magician. Although he became a prince with a demon as a pet and was pampered by hot maids, it was far from what he had imagined. Before his reincarnation, Lloyd found himself in front of nobles who laughed at him for being a virgin loser. They asked him to use magic, but when he failed to even eliminate a fly with his powers, they made fun of him even more. They told him that diligence couldn't make up for his lack of talent and breeding, and one of them attacked him, roasting him to his death. In his final moments, Lloyd regretted not learning more magic, but when he opened his eyes again, he found himself surrounded by beautiful women. He tried to cast a fire spell, causing an explosion that was celebrated as the birth of Prince Lloyd. Years passed, and Lloyd found himself hiding from maids after getting caught smelling their panties. He ran into two knights who discussed how Lloyd's young age might eliminate him from the crown competition, but one of them argued that Lloyd had impressive qualities, like speaking early and refusing his mother's melon milk. Lloyd, now the seventh son of the royal family, remembered his past life as a regular salaryman. He didn't care about his royal status, only wanting to learn as much magic as possible. One day, a maid named Silpha caught him in the library, and they began sword training. Silpha told Lloyd that as a royal, swordsmanship was important. She had been tasked with his education, a purpose that had become her erotic life. As the fight continued, Silpha complimented Lloyd on his progress, but Lloyd realized she was holding back. Using his control-type magic, he traced her every move, practically hacking the fight. Despite this, his small virgin body put him at a disadvantage. Lloyd started using more magic to raise his skill levels, and the battle heated up. He thought he might win, but before he could strike, Silpha realized he was using magical hacks and knocked him down. However, she was proud of his progress, hugging him and saying there was no rush in his growth. Later, Silpha took Lloyd to the women's bathing area, allowing him to witness more melons in a day than he had in his entire previous life. Other maids told him about the Forbidden Library, which housed a demon. They spoke of a time when Salem was nearly destroyed, and countless mages sacrificed themselves to seal the demon grimoire inside a book. Silpha dismissed it as a fairy tale, but Lloyd, trembling in fear, was intrigued. One maid offered him a chance to sleep on her thick thighs as pillows if he was scared, and the other maids began fighting over him. That night, Lloyd sneaked out, using concealment magic to become invisible. He easily passed by the knights guarding the underground library and opened the gate. As he explored, a book flew around, praising him for breaking the seal. The book introduced itself as Grimoire, the demon sealed within. Grimoire offered Lloyd gold for unsealing him, but Lloyd realized it was just dust turned into fake gold, avoiding being scammed. He decided to replace the seal, as releasing such a dangerous demon could threaten the kingdom. Grimoire tried to reassure Lloyd, saying he only had issues with old mages and would teach Lloyd ancient magic. Lloyd, overjoyed, broke the seal and released Grimoire. Grimoire immediately attacked Lloyd, but his attacks did no harm thanks to Lloyd's barrier. Lloyd used Grimoire's magic and commented on how beautiful it was. Frustrated, Grimoire used a double incantation technique to attack, but again, it did nothing. Lloyd, realizing that only demons could use double incantation, watched Grimoire grow tired. Grimoire tried to escape, but Lloyd blocked him with a barrier, claiming it was to protect the kingdom from his own magic. Annoyed, Grimoire tried attacking, but Lloyd used a fireball spell to defeat him, turning Grimoire into a medium rare steak. Afterward, Lloyd fixed the library using magic, and Grimoire called him his master. Lloyd, impressed that demons couldn't be eliminated from magic, remarked that demons could still be beaten. Grimoire then pledged himself to Lloyd and agreed to serve as his familiar. Lloyd asked Grimoire to shrink down, and he transformed into a cute little potato. However, Lloyd's immense mana made Grimoire tremble. Lloyd reassured Grimoire, promising even more impressive sights in the future. The next day, while Lloyd was reading in the library, his brother Albert visited. Albert demonstrated his magical accuracy, impressing everyone, including Lloyd, who realized that Albert, the second prince, had access to all kinds of royal facilities. Albert also had ladies flocking to him. Lloyd, noticing how rare it was for him to be allowed to cast magic in the castle, decided to act as the clueless younger brother. He purposefully made his fireballs graze the target instead of hitting it directly. One of the elders mocked him, and Lloyd thought about adding rotations to his fireballs. Albert then took a break and allowed his brother to play around with magic. Once Albert and the others left, Lloyd was thrilled to finally get some practice in. He wanted to work on his magic and rise up the ranks with the ladies. Grimoire, however, told him it was impossible, but Lloyd ended up assimilating Grimoire into his body. He asked Grimoire to cast Pyre Lance Insines, and Grimoire, reluctantly agreeing, was shocked by the complexity of Lloyd's magic. Lloyd explained it was just a spell stack, a technique that abbreviated long incantations to speed up casting. Grimoire was in awe, stating that normally a spell stack wouldn't have more than 2 or 3 spells. Both Grimoire and Lloyd realized that they could communicate through various parts of Lloyd's body. Preparing to perform a magic spell, Grimoire struggled to keep up with Lloyd's massive mana flow. Lloyd eventually fires an attack that causes a huge explosion. Meanwhile, people begin questioning Albert's focus on Lloyd, wondering why he gives so much attention to that pervert brat. Albert responds, saying that Lloyd purposefully grazed all the targets, and he's likely a prodigy who might even become a famous mage one day. The knight then notices that it's already night, but little does he know, Lloyd's magic accidentally created a hole in the sky. Thankfully, it manages to return to its original state. The next morning, Grimoire informs Lloyd that his stunt was featured on YouTube. Lloyd mentions how he panicked for a moment, but is relieved it wasn't worse. Lloyd then sees news about an A-class team clearing a dungeon, and he decides to explore it to bring back a bunch of mystically empowered items. Grimoire warns that his absence will freak everyone out, but Lloyd uses a clever trick to avoid detection. He takes an acorn from his backside and uses magic to turn it into a perfect replica of himself. Grimoire is impressed, though he doubts the clone will fool Silpha. Despite this, Lloyd leaves it to chance and heads out. Grimoire has assimilated part of his body into the clone and tells Lloyd to be careful of Silpha. Lloyd feels proud of the clone's abilities, and Grimoire, excited about the opportunity, wants to check out the castle. Lloyd, though, expresses how glad he is to have Grimoire as his familiar, making Grimoire tear up in embarrassment. Outside the castle, Lloyd finds himself at a loss for where to find a dungeon, but his search quickly turns eventful when he spots a girl running from a group of orcs. She eventually stops and starts fighting them, defeating them one by one. Lloyd realizes she is using Kai, a foreign technique that channels energy through breathing. She notices Lloyd watching her and prepares to attack, but Lloyd quickly disguises himself and introduces himself as Robert. The girl, smitten, immediately becomes interested in him. Meanwhile, Lloyd uses double incantations to blend his own face with Albert's, creating a new form. The girl introduces herself as Tao, a B-ranked adventurer and martial artist. She reveals she trained in a dojo for 18 years and has been seeking a sugar daddy, but no one was interested in her brutal nature. Tao, seeing an opportunity, decides to make Robert her boyfriend. Lloyd, sensing the chance to clear a dungeon together, suggests it. Tao eagerly agrees, beating a bunch of monsters to impress him, but Lloyd is too busy collecting gems to notice. He asks Tao if she's adventuring alone, and she admits that she hasn't found a baby daddy to accompany her. Lloyd asks her about Kai, surprising Tao, as not many people are aware of it. Tao explains that Kai training involves breathing to circulate energy, giving powers beyond normal abilities. She offers to teach Lloyd, but when he tries the breathing on his own, he feels his lungs burning. Tao warns him not to attempt it without practice, and agrees to teach him properly while they continue through the dungeon. Back at the castle, Silpha finds the fake Lloyd and takes him out for sword practice. More monsters appear in the dungeon, but Tao manages to defeat all the monsters they encounter. They reach the final treasure, but just as they are about to open the chest, a slash comes at them from below, followed by a skeleton-like creature. Tao tells Lloyd to get out of the way, as her fight with the skeleton might break his wee little bones. The battle begins, and Tao fights fiercely, buying time for Lloyd to escape. Lloyd is knocked across the cave by the force of Tao's strike, and he crushes some goblins while trying to stop himself. He wonders if it's a good idea to return and asks Grimoire, who seems terrified and urges Lloyd to come home. Back in the cave, Tao loses more blood than she does during her monthly cycle, but she continues to fight. The skeleton recognizes her Kai technique, mentioning that he once ate someone with a similar ability. He also insults Tao, calling her flat-chested and not worth eating. He praises Lloyd for reacting to his attack, and Tao remarks that both she and Lloyd are desperate for knowledge. She senses that Lloyd might find something interesting, as most skeletons are more interested in dirty panties than anything else. Tao continues her assault on the skeleton, eventually breaking through its defenses. However, her body gives out, and the skeleton powers up its attack, ready to take her life. Just in time, Lloyd appears, defending Tao from the skeleton's attack. Tao notices the seriousness on Lloyd's face as he lunges at the skeleton and appears behind it, using the Kai technique while evading the creature's attacks. Lloyd begins focusing, trying to merge his mana with Kai. He forgets about his usual clapping techniques and takes in as much air as he can, using his speed to defend himself. He creates an offensive ability by combining mana and kai, but finds it too weak to reach the skeleton. Determined, he keeps improving his technique, and the skeleton begins to freak out as Lloyd's attacks start landing. Eventually, Lloyd hits the skeleton with a strike that slices it in half. After the battle, they check the treasure, only to find a rugged knife. Tao, impressed by Lloyd's strength, decides to reward him by offering action later that night. Just then, the treasure chest begins to sink, and the cave starts to collapse. Fortunately, Lloyd manages to dig out the chest, and they leave the dungeon before it closes. Tao realizes that Lloyd is a powerful mage and wonders if he used Kai techniques to mock her. Before Lloyd leaves, Tao mentions that his last attack was called Kai Blade, and promises to train harder to use it herself. She also vows to eat a lot to grow her chest to Lloyd's liking. Back at home, Lloyd finds Grimoire in a dire state. Grimoire explains that Sylpha chased him around and beat him up for getting weaker. He mocks Lloyd for coming home with a shabby knife, but Lloyd isn't deterred. He dips the knife in water and scrapes the surface, separating its magical essence. The mana essence turns out to be a catalyst that can even strengthen a cheap butter knife. Lloyd then mixes the mana essence in a glass container, commenting on how rare it is and how difficult enchantments are to do. He decides to analyze the essence and create some himself. Using a spell that separates ingredients, Lloyd identifies the components and begins gathering the materials. After robbing an old geezer for some silver, he and Grimoire melt it down. Lloyd's sword training with Sylpha begins, and even though he uses cheap tricks, Sylpha wins the match. She's proud of his improvement despite his earlier poor performance. Sylpha starts thinking about how Lloyd could become the knight commander and get a bunch of beautiful women when he grows up. After adding oil to the silver, Lloyd requests a supply of weapons from Albert. This results in the knights having to give away their swords, which they had saved money for, instead of replacing their nut cups. With everything ready, Lloyd begins writing the first enchantment on the sword, but his attempt breaks it. Undeterred, he continues to enchant more swords and eventually comes out with 50 good ones. Albert examines one of the swords and can't believe how well it turned out, making him wonder if Lloyd is more capable than he thought. The knights start mocking Lloyd's abilities, while Sylpha controls her anger. Lloyd asks Albert to test one of the swords, and he agrees. The group, including Lloyd, his brother Prince Albert, and Sylpha, leave the capital to go on a hunt. As they enter the forest, Lloyd asks Sylpha where the monsters are, and she replies that they are by the lake. Albert teases Sylpha about how she won't let Lloyd out of her sight, suggesting that maybe she has special feelings for him. Sylpha unsheathes her sword, startling Albert, who immediately goes limp, saying he was just joking. Sylpha announces that they are under attack. A group of monsters, resembling kobolds with steel weapons, charges at them. One of the soldiers shouts that they are there to protect Albert, completely ignoring Lloyd's presence. Lloyd jokes about being scared, though he has already sensed the kobolds with a spectral detection technique that Tao taught him. The soldiers quickly realize that the enchanted swords are cutting through the monsters like flimsy paper. Albert announces to everyone that Lloyd is a talented enchanter. Sylpha, standing on a pile of vanquished kobolds, agrees with him. One remaining kobold attempts to attack Lloyd and Albert, but unexpectedly, Tao jumps in, kicking the kobolds away with her powerful thighs. She announces herself, and Lloyd, in a moment of confusion, carelessly calls out her name, almost giving away that he is Robert, the adventurer she met earlier. Tao approaches and analyzes his face, noticing that he looks like Robert. Before she can piece the clues together, Sylpha cuts down another kobold that was attacking Tao. Sylpha thanks Tao for her help, but warns her not to be too familiar with Lloyd. The two women exchange glares, and Albert steps in, inviting Tao to join them. That night, they camp by the lake, and Albert thanks Tao for her help, shamelessly mentioning that he is a prince. Tao, however, doesn't think he's the one she senses. She looks around for Lloyd, but doesn't see him anywhere. Lloyd, trying to avoid Tao so she doesn't recognize him, enters his tent, only to be blasted with two massive grenades. Sylpha then suffocates him with her WMHH bombs, saying she will be sleeping in his tent. Lloyd tries to escape, but she's quickly able to overpower him. Just as she pins him down in a horse-riding position, Tao walks in and is shocked by the scene before her. Sylpha throws a dagger at Tao and leaves the tent to meet her. The two women argue, and the soldiers, watching the quarrel, blush at the sight of their bodies. Lloyd, feeling stressed, walks away and sits with Albert, who advises him to be careful with women. Tao and Sylpha notice the soldiers watching them and knock them out. Tao mentions that she only stopped by because she was on a mission to a collapsed shrine. Sylpha tells her to leave, but Albert insists it's too dangerous for one person to go alone and advises her to stay with them because of her ability to detect danger. Lloyd senses a monster in the forest just before Tao does, and it attacks the soldiers. Lloyd joins Silpha, who tells him to stay behind her. Lloyd watches the action, analyzing how the monster can move quickly despite its size. Tao and the soldiers attack the monster, and Albert uses a fire spell, amplified by the enchanted swords, to burn the monster to a crisp. Everyone applauds him, but Albert gives the credit to Lloyd, saying it was because of his enchanted swords. Grimoire, worried, looks towards the shrine and remembers that a demon was sealed there. As if on cue, the burnt wolf monster stands up, followed by other monsters. The monster opens its mouth, revealing the ugliest demon ever, Pazu. The demon laughs at them and calls them puny mortals before unleashing a horde of monsters that are both cute and ugly. The monsters regenerate quickly from damage. Grimoire explains to Lloyd that Pazu is controlling the monsters with a type of magic that also feeds them mana, allowing them to regenerate. Lloyd, in typical fashion, asks Grimoire to teach him the spell, even while the others are fighting for their lives. Pazu insults both Silpha and Lloyd, calling them useless mortals. Silpha approaches Pazu, showing off her sword tricks, and roasts him, telling him to stop talking, because his breath stinks so badly it might make her nose fall off. Enraged, Pazu attacks in a blitz, but Silpha dodges and cuts off all of his legs, surprising everyone. Pazu focuses his mana on regenerating the body of the monster he's inside, which gives the others a chance to defeat the other monsters. Albert tells Silpha to keep attacking Pazu so he can't spread his mana. Meanwhile, Lloyd is learning how to use string magic without a care in the world. Grimoire explains that Pazu likely has a knack for string magic, which is why he is good at controlling the monsters. Pazu then tries the typical villain technique of threatening to hurt Lloyd's loved ones, saying he will shred Lloyd to bits and cut out his innards. This proves to be a grave mistake. He manages to swallow Silpha, but it doesn't do any damage. Inside Pazu's mouth, Silpha cuts him open from the inside, unleashing a barrage of attacks that look like a Fruit Ninja game. She separates Pazu from the mouths of the monsters and delivers the beating of his life. Pazu, now on his knees in defeat, is humiliated. Silpha tells him the only thing he's fit to feel is her master's blade. In retaliation, Pazu, now looking much stronger, unleashes his miasma, healing all of his wounds. Silpha, exhausted from the battle and nearly in tatters, collapses. Tao, the only one still standing, tries to resist Pazu, but he swallows her into one of the bear wolves. However, before Tao is completely swallowed, she senses the presence of Robert, her burning crush, who is still Lloyd. Lloyd, unfazed by the miasma, asks Pazu questions about it. Pazu is surprised by Lloyd's calmness, having not noticed that he is completely unaffected by his miasma. After answering Lloyd's questions, Pazu finally realizes that Grimoire is a demon. Pazu taunts Grimoire for serving Lloyd, even surprised that demons can be cute. Lloyd, now completely unfazed, easily copies Pazu's string magic and takes control of the monsters. He orders them to spit out Tao, taking control of the situation. With their pride affected as predators, the monster group attacks Pazu to take revenge for having been under his control and for the loss of their parents. After a series of attacks, Pazu squints his face, making it even uglier, before stomping on the bearwolves in frustration. He releases his aura, as if to make a statement that they could never beat him, claiming he's an ancient demon who has lived for centuries. But just then, Lloyd releases his own aura, which easily swallows up Pazu's aura and dreams. Pazu instantly realizes he is in trouble as Lloyd doesn't even see him as an opponent, just a weakling, perfect for a lab rat, but not much of a warm-up. He decides to run, but not before showing everyone the peak of his ugliness. Lloyd begins his attacks, and Pazu soon praises himself for being able to dodge Lloyd's moves, which is impressive, until he gets caught. Lloyd cooks up a crazy spell to test Pazu's vitality, as demons are not easily defeated by magic. Pazu, trembling, realizes that he's reached the first hurdle of world domination and begs for his life. Lloyd wants to keep the attack going for 30 minutes, but Pazu, the great demon, turns out to be more of a 2-minute guy. Lloyd is surprised, thinking Pazu could withstand more. In a rare show of strength, Pazu breaks the barriers and releases the pain of his failed ambitions, slowly turning into nothing. Grimoire swallows his remaining mana, promising to take on his ambition. Everyone soon recovers from the fight and slowly gets up, praising Lloyd. They attribute the victory to Robert before heading back to their kingdom with a huge fan club for Prince Albert. In the kingdom, they appear before the king and recount the situation. Albert suggests that Lloyd should be allowed to join the royal succession, but Lloyd immediately rejects the offer, saying no with a straight face. He figures being king would cut into his magic practice time, and besides, Why rule the kingdom when he can rule the laws of reality? Lloyd plays around with Shiro, one of the bearwolves who decided to follow him. Silpha shows up and they chat about magic and other things, while his father and brother watch from above with great expectations for his future. Lloyd tries teaching Shiro some tricks and commands, but can't get him to learn the complicated ones. Silpha suggests that Lloyd go to his sister, Princess Aliez, who is a prodigy in communicating with animals of all kinds. Lloyd agrees, thinking it's a great idea, and they head to her tower. Upon seeing her baby brother, Aliez pounces on him, giving him a kiss. This causes Silpha to feel a slight heartache, unable to bear the scene. She swiftly snatches Lloyd away from his sister, ready to fight off any girl who got too close, but she didn't expect Aliez's sneak attack. Aliez is scolded by her maid, who mentions how cute her baby brother is, admitting she couldn't help herself. Before Lloyd can ask about Shiro, his sister already knows what he wants. He proceeds to ask how she communicates with her animals. Aliez explains it's all about love and advises Lloyd not to overcomplicate things. After observing her for a little while, Lloyd understands how she communicates with them, and is able to give complicated commands to his bearwolf on his first try. Aliez, excited, pounces on his banana again to celebrate, but Lloyd escapes her grasp. Afterward, Silpha suggests Lloyd train immediately, but he declines. Albert comes to his rescue, claiming he wants to talk to his brother about something. Silpha protests, feeling like everyone is getting ahead of her and spending time with Lloyd, but she can't disobey Albert. In the end, Albert tells Lloyd that he wants him to visit someone, the fourth prince, Diane. They visit Diane's blacksmith workshop, which is situated in the middle of a small pond. Diane says he wants to talk to Lloyd about the sword enchantments he did for Albert and his knights, as he doesn't believe a kid could do that. Lloyd feels nervous, and Albert tells him it's been Diane's dream to make enchanted swords since he was 10. Lloyd makes an enchanted sword that shocks Diane so much that his jaw literally drops. Diane asks Lloyd to help him make the perfect enchanted swords, which can only be made when the enchanter and the blacksmith work in perfect unison. Lloyd, excited about the process, wants to join in. However, the swords keep breaking, and they can't hold the enchantment. Grimoire, surprised to see his master struggling, notices that the mana essence they're using is not of the right quality. Just as Lloyd is thinking about sneaking into a dungeon to get pure mana essence, Silpha openly suggests it, though she frantically acts like he's not the type for dungeons. She figures Lloyd must want to see if he can level up his acting skills before leveling up his loot. Lloyd accepts the suggestion and heads to the Adventurers Guild to start his journey and register as an adventurer. While filling out the form, a crystal ball is given to him to measure his abilities. Compressing his mana so as not to cause too much attention, Lloyd touches the crystal ball. He is graded as E rank, but the attendant notices his potential due to his excellent magic power, and calls him the most promising adventurer since the Silver Blader, who happens to be Silpha. An uproar breaks out at the guild as the crowd sneers at comparing this weakling Lloyd to the Silver Blader. Silpha wants to re-register him so they can access better quests, but discovers she must start 2 ranks below, making her C rank since she's been away from the guild for so long. Just then, Tao shows up and offers to help them accept a list of quests, but not before she and Silpha have their usual spat, with Silpha trying to keep her beloved Lloyd away from Tao. Silpha tells Lloyd about her time as an adventurer and how she failed to take down the Assassin's Guild. After the conversation, they explore random dungeons. Back at the palace, Albert motivates his brother Diane, telling him he wants him to have a relationship with Lloyd. That's why he brought them both together. Diane, moved by his brother's pure heart, is set to make amazing spellbound swords to support Albert in case a war is brewing. Lloyd returns from the dungeons, and he and Diane make a series of spellbound swords, which completely shock Diane and Albert at how efficient and powerful the swords are. When they see its power, they have to check if their eyes are enchanted to witness something so epic and legendary. After a long day with his siblings and adventuring, Lloyd settles in bed, playing with Grimoire and Shiro, before noticing an intruder has invaded the palace. He immediately takes action, enclosing himself and the intruder in a barrier. He finds out that it's a cute little girl who immediately wants to poison him using her magic. Lloyd tries to counter by healing himself, but she informs him that it's useless, as her toxins are unbeatable. Lloyd casually accepts the challenge and uses a purification spell. She escapes, feeling like she had the victory, but Lloyd, excited to have discovered a new magic variation, wants to study it further. After she leaves, he heals himself, and Grimoire shows up with a change of clothes. Grimoire asks why Lloyd let her go, and Lloyd explains that he did so to follow her to her hideout, seeing it as a high-stakes game of hide-and-seek. Lloyd recalls recognizing her from the posters he saw at the Adventurers Guild, which Silpha had mentioned. He's excited to study the members of the Assassin's Guild. As he and Grimoire exit the palace, Sylpha rushes out to chase after him, like the man of her dreams, except this man is still a child. At the hideout of the assassins, the poison-blighted Ren reports her visit to the palace and what she discovered. One of the members criticizes her for not completing the task properly and tells her to stop trying to act like their leader. Just then, they realize they are being watched. Lloyd, disguised, appears and shocks Ren, who believes her poison is so deadly that it would take a while for anyone to recover. To her surprise, Lloyd just shrugs it off like a bad cold. They get into a fight, each trying to explain their powers and names with various attacks, only to soon realize that the 7th prince, Lloyd, is a magic sociopath. While they're plotting their next move, Lloyd is busy experimenting with new spells, laughing while bleeding from the mouth. His chaotic magic battle turns into a front row seat for the most chaotic magic class ever. He soon discovers that none of the members of the Assassin's Guild can control their abilities and regard them as curses, which is why they live their lives as assassins doing jobs no one else wants. Babylon has ultra high flexibility, Galilea has ultra sticky white stuff, Talia has self-inflicted injury transfer, and Crow has cursed speech. Lloyd fine-tunes Galilea's body and attacks, imprinting a spell on it. Before he can catch a breather, Ren attacks, trying to avenge her friend whom she thought had died. Not 2 seconds later, Galilea stands up, in tears, realizing he's fine and can now control his curse. Lloyd points to the rest of the assassins, inviting them to come and get their fix. He tells them he hasn't lifted their curse but made a spell that allows them to control their abilities. After fixing them all, the battle comes to an end as they sit down to eat and drink. Lloyd, who obviously took lessons from Sylpha and Tao, has somehow lost all his clothes in the fight. Babylon and Galilea tease Ren, telling her that now that her poison isn't leaking out, she can wear clothes without worrying her wardrobe will turn into a toxic fashion statement. Ren protests, denying her joy and instead talking about the oddities of Lloyd, who has just helped them. Grimm jumps to Lloyd's defense, explaining that Lloyd plays with arcane forces for fun. He says that fighting demons and making spellbound swords is the kind of fun the young prince enjoys. Lloyd, excited to continue the sparring match to see more fun magic, is disappointed when the assassins refuse. He instead wishes to talk with them, as they have a lot they want him to know. However, each sentence that Galilea speaks deflates him until he hears the name of the leader, Jade, the Shadow Wolf Phantom, who is blighted with a teleportation ability. Hearing about new magic that he hasn't experienced, Lloyd gets excited for the conversation about Jade, but the explanation reveals little information about the leader, putting Lloyd back into his deflated state. Soon, the conversation ends, and as they are about to dig into their meal, they receive a letter teleported to them from their leader. The letter informs them that Jade is still alive and well, which relieves them, and they celebrate like little kids. The assassins apologize to Lloyd, saying they want to meet their leader, but they promise to pay him back sometime. Ren, still dressed provocatively, sheepishly asks Lloyd to join them, but he firmly declines. He then points out that their precious leader, Jade, sent the letter to their precise location, meaning he has probably learned to use his powers. The other members begin to suspect that Jade might have lied to them. Ren pathetically weeps, reassuring the others that Jade has probably just learned how to use his powers. Lloyd tells them that whatever happens, he'll take care of Jade, and they should just follow him. The others are relieved and start to praise him for his awesomeness. Sylpha arrives at the scene to find a note Lloyd left, stating that he went to the neighboring kingdom, Lord Ost, with the Assassin's Guild. The overprotective nanny and Prince Albert, who adores his little brother, leave their diplomatic sides behind and declare war on Lord Ost. Albert figures that if assassins are involved, the only way to ensure his sibling's safety is to turn his reaction dial to total war. Meanwhile, the pathetic fools of the Assassin's Guild don't last up to 10 minutes and have to rest in the woods. Ren runs off into the woods, saying she will find something for them to eat. She reflects on how her poison killed her parents when she was a child, and how she had to grow up alone in the forest until Jade found her and took her in. Lloyd caresses the robe that Jade made for Ren as if it were a long-lost lover. He says he would like to meet Jade, and Grimm comments that Jade must be an incredible person for Lloyd to take such an interest in him. Ren prepares a meal that looks identical to a witch's cooking pot. The guild members are terrified to eat such disgusting food, only to see Grimm and Lloyd downing it like hungry puppies. Seeing a royal like Lloyd eating the food encourages them to try it too, and they find it's not so bad, even going so far as to ask for seconds. They continue toward Lordost's castle, with Lloyd falling asleep like a lazy shut-in while being carried. Grimm counters when the others say he looks cute sleeping, and explains that Lloyd is protected by a heavy-duty barrier at all times. The guild members, grateful for his help, decide to scout Lord Do's castle without him to ensure it is safe before bringing him along. Grim accompanies them and wisely insists that while Lloyd is safe alone, the guild members might not be. He also reasons that Lloyd would be furious if anything happened to them. Upon arriving at the castle, the guild members are welcomed by a celebration from a group of fanatic-looking creeps. Jade greets them warmly. They settle into the festivities, relieved to see Jade seemingly safe. However, when they begin questioning Jade about his suspicious new mastery of his formerly useless ability and his prolonged absence, like my father who went to buy milk and never came back, the atmosphere shifts dramatically. The castle's inhabitants and Jade all lose their cheerful demeanor, smiling like a collection of possessed Chucky dolls. Jade uses magic to force the guild members to kneel, revealing that he doesn't care about them. Strange dark entities emerge from the inhabitants' bodies around them. Grim, sensing something is wrong, attacks Jade, but Jade easily kicks him away from the castle in a way Messi would be proud of. Grim lands near Lloyd, who has just woken up from his lazy slumber. Inside the castle, the demon lord masquerading as Jade reveals his true sinister nature. He insults the guild members, disclosing that everyone around them in the castle is a demon he brought from the netherworld. The entity, now known as Gizarm, explains to them like daycare children that he has been trying to possess Jade because of his powerful teleportation ability and eventually succeeded after wearing down Jade's mind. The guild members are devastated by the loss of their leader and friend, producing enough tears to fill the Mississippi River. The demons express their eagerness to possess the guild members, but Ren angrily protests. Gizarm, who seems to love soccer, kicks her away, destroying a hairpin that Jade had gifted her. He picks her up like an abandoned toy and notices the magical tattoos on their bodies, courtesy of Lloyd, which help them control their powers. Annoyed, he demands to know who tampered with his prized property and uses magic to force Ren to reveal the information. Ren resists by biting her tongue, and Gizarm continues his interrogation. Suddenly, a large amount of mana surrounds the assassins and shields them. A massive energy beam blasts down, creating a huge crater while exterminating the low-level demons in the area, like germs. The assassins are shocked to have survived the blast and see Lloyd standing with a serious expression, looking down on them like a real boss. He then descends and comforts Ren by healing her injuries, telling the Blighted Assassins Guild to flee. The remaining demons in the area are horrified by the huge crater left by Lloyd's blast and wonder if their lord is still alive. Suddenly, Gizarm appears at the back of the group and kicks one of the demons into the crater filled with lava. He then gives them a cold look and orders them to go after the assassins. This time, Lloyd is up against Gizarm, a guy who looks like he eats chaos for breakfast, and washes it down with a gallon of pure evil. He's the kind of villain who sends shivers down everyone's spine, except Lloyd, of course. For Lloyd, Gizarm is just another challenge to perfect his magic on, with a playful twist. After witnessing Lloyd's creative approach to magic, Grim starts to rethink his life choices. He's the voice of reason in Lloyd's world of magical mayhem. As Lloyd gears up for his grand entrance against Gizarm, Grim is already mentally drafting his resignation letter. Gizarm, with all his dark and brooding energy, doesn't even faze Lloyd. In fact, Lloyd shows up to the fight like he's about to start a new anime. Spells blazing with a smirk that screams, "Let me cook!" The fight itself is less of a battle and more of a magical circus. Gizarm pulls out all the stops, dark magic, menacing speeches, the whole villain starter pack, but Lloyd, ever the overachiever, is busy multitasking. He's taking down Gizarm's attacks while mentally noting which spells he needs to perfect later, like a pro gamer casually breezing through a level while eating a sandwich. The intense battle is such a sight that even the low-level demons and the blighted assassins stop in their tracks to watch. As both sides come back to their senses, the assassins return to trying to escape and the low-level demons return to trying to capture them. Gizarm notices that despite all his awesome attacks, he hasn't managed to pressure Lloyd once, and the young prince remains completely unharmed. Lloyd, not at all surprised by this outcome, is secretly analyzing ways to counter Gizarm's attacks. The two enter into a spirited conversation about magic power and mana control, temporarily ceasing the battle to enjoy the conversation, giving each other a fun, learnable moment, even before their goal of eliminating each other. After the brief conversation, the battle resumes, with Gizarm taking the first strike. He looks like he's caught Lloyd in his attack as multiple strikes pierce through the young prince. The blighted assassins, now able to control their powers, throw an attack against the demons to aid their smooth escape, but soon realize it's impossible to escape without the demons catching up quickly. Galilea and Talia are ready to die for the safety of their teammates. The fight returns to Lloyd, who uses a substitute spell to escape Gizarm's attack. His magic pursuit has led him to learn the art of ninjutsu, which Naruto would be proud of. Confident he can't be defeated, Lloyd draws one of his enchanted swords to aid him in his battle. Gizarm gets excited about finding a worthy opponent, and Lloyd asks if they can move the fight somewhere else, as he notices the arrival of the overprotective Silpha, who is still following him around like a fangirl, ready to fend off any competition with her strength. Meanwhile, the rest of Lloyd's crew starts to realize that being around him is like living in a perpetual storm, exciting, unpredictable, and potentially life-threatening. Albert and Silpha start interrogating the Assassins Guild, trying to squeeze them like dry lemons about Lloyd's whereabouts and actions. The guild members are terrified, whimpering, and reluctant to reveal Lloyd's power because of a promise he asked them to make earlier. He instructed them to keep his strength secret from the royal family. Ren explains that the demons are the true villains who kidnapped their leader Jade, while Lloyd is actually assisting them. Silpha doesn't believe her and threatens to chop off what little chest she has. Prince Albert interrupts, and the guild members think he'll believe them. They proceed to praise him like a team of ugly cheerleaders, but Albert simply says they should start chopping heads from the adults, adding that he doesn't want to start with the kids, before telling them to shut their mouths. Ren starts to cry, begging Prince Albert and Silpha with Oscar-worthy tears to believe them. Alieza manages to convince Albert and Silpha to believe the guild's story, saying her pet didn't sense any ill intent from them. They decide to press on to find Lloyd, but their progress is halted when the bridge collapses due to an aerial attack by Gizarm. Gizarm asks Lloyd if he's okay with fighting alone before trying to spam his spear attack again. Lloyd dodges and holds his sword like he has some grand plan cooked up in his pot of mysteries. This makes Grimm wonder what Lloyd is up to with the sword. Because of the broken bridge, the troops have to retreat so the demons don't surround them. Prince Albert's sword troops start throwing weak fireballs at the demons, but they don't do much emotional damage.
Emotional damage!
The sword troops start losing mana quickly and soon look like men who have just gone 12 rounds with their wives or husbands. They struggle against the demons, who regenerate quickly. Albert, worried about the people like some divine saint, initially hesitates to eliminate them because the people are inhabited, but after Babylon snaps one of their necks like a twig, Albert and the soldiers attack the demons without mercy. Albert uses a massive spell that rains fire on the demons, leaving him weak as well. On the bridge, Silpha attempts to cross the broken bridge like a suicidal fool but fails, and is attacked by a much stronger Class 8 demon. The demon starts spitting insults at Silpha, calling her an insect, but Silpha claps back, telling him his hat looks like a turd. Enraged, the demon attacks her, and during their intense battle, Silpha and the demon start copying each other's attacks like a third-rate Kakashi, but neither can best the other for a while. The demon brags about being able to copy Silpha's sword technique because the body he possesses must have worked hard in swordsmanship. Silpha calls for the dog, who has now climbed back up and retrieves a sword hidden in the giant dog's thick fur. Another flashback shows Silpha lamenting like a self-proclaimed goddess, her inability to use her full strength without breaking swords. Lloyd, accompanied by Deanne, jogs toward her like a happy puppy and presents her with an enhanced sword, which she calls Demon Bane. The sword is made to be stronger and more flexible because he guesses that Silpha is holding back. Silpha then gives him a legendary hug that lets Lloyd feel the full squishiness of her melons. In the present, the demon goes into roasting mode, insulting the Assassin's Guild members about Jade. Silpha responds by slicing the demon in one strike using her technique, House of Langris, leading Tiger Bite. In a flashback, Jade silently sat down before a statue in a church and exclaimed that he had finally done it. However, as he was having his moment of peace, Gizarm appeared and asked Jade if he had made peace with his death. In response, Jade replied that he would not let Gizarm get away with what he had done and that he would lose no matter what. Gizarm became curious about what Jade had just said and tried to ask who would defeat him. Jade silently died. Suddenly, Gizarm saw the chance and took over his body to become the Jade everyone knows, with long black hair. Gizarm wondered what Jade was trying to do before he passed away. Through Jade's body, he could use his powers and see his memories and friends. However, there was something deep within Jade's soul that he could not witness. At the hideout, Gizarm congratulates himself for taking over Jade's powers. When asked what to do next, he reveals that Jade was afraid of wars and would tickle his soul even in death, intending to start a great war. Back at the broken bridge, Silpha moves toward a fallen swordsman whose body has been taken over by a demon, lying in a pool of blood. Silpha sits down, praising the swordsman for his unique style. Ren starts crying, and Silpha calls everyone unfit as assassins. Suddenly, the river evaporates and hot steam blinds everyone. While everyone wonders what happened, Ren notices Lloyd flying in a shield, with Gizarm and Jade's body following him. Gizarm rushes behind Lloyd, trying to slay him with his mana spears, something powerful enough to pierce through Lloyd's unbreakable layered barrier. However, Lloyd manages to create a new barrier every time. The last mana spear penetrates through his shield and initiates a cursed speech, but Lloyd, as overpowered as ever, flies away without any hesitation. Gizarm tries to attack again with his other abilities, but Lloyd starts to figure out his next move. He decides to go on the offensive, casting Infernum Aurare, summoning a giant fiery figure to attack Gizarm with an all-flame punch. Gizarm teleports, clearly more interested in saving his clothes than fighting. Lloyd figures out that Gizarm dodged his attack, and now he's trying to learn from Gizarm's movements. Seeing the water vapor in the air, Lloyd uses it to his advantage. He rushes to stab Gizarm with dirt clones, and while everyone believes they've caught the real Lloyd, Gizarm is pierced by another clone. With his real sword in hand, Lloyd appears behind him and casts flames on him. Now surrounded by hundreds of Naruto clones, Gizarm tries to eliminate them with a barrage of mana spears. He fails to catch the real Lloyd and is left bewildered. Eventually, the real Lloyd silently rushes in, dodging all the spears and stabs Gizarm. As Lloyd approaches Gizarm, he remembers a conversation with Grimm about his sword spell called Spell Taker. With this spell, if the sword hits another spell or its magic user, the user can either use it to increase their mana or analyze it to learn it. Using the spell, Obscure to hide himself, Lloyd hits Gizarm's Shadow Wolf magic to analyze it. Grimoire screams at Lloyd to stop, warning him that Jade has spent his whole life learning the spell and still failed. Lloyd suddenly enters a whole dimension of Shadow Wolf and tries to look for Jade, but ends up seeing large mana balls. Through telepathy, he learns the truth about Jade's magic. Back in the real world, all the dirt clones fall, and Lloyd finally reveals himself to Gizarm. Gizarm taunts Lloyd and offers him a chance to join his team and take over the world. However, Lloyd taunts Gizarm's weakness, telling him how humans are powerful because they have the ability to dream and have no limits. Gizarm takes no interest in Lloyd's words and attacks again. Lloyd punches the life out of him instead. Groaning from the pain, Gizarm realizes it wasn't even a mana punch, but rather one filled with a Kai charge. Lloyd continues to taunt him, urging him to hurry up, which makes Gizarm angrier. Lloyd asks Gizarm if he remembers what Jade told him before passing, and Gizarm gets a flashback of Jade's words, "You will lose." Gizarm loses his cool, and when he tries to attack Lloyd again, Lloyd beats him to a pulp, combining all his techniques. For Gizarm, the damage is not the problem, but the pain from his attacks. Gizarm tries to dodge and run away, but all his attempts are futile. Lloyd brings him to the brink of death. When Lloyd almost pushes Gizarm into magma, Gizarm manages to escape, but Lloyd kicks him super hard and releases his aura while they are in the air. Lloyd reflects on the time when he used to learn magic and how it made him bricked. He could imagine the people who created those magics, and it made him fall in love with dreams. Lloyd tells Gizarm that if he's out of ideas, he must die. Gizarm, however, has one last straw. He reveals that the Demon Lord can control all of the mana in the atmosphere, and he accumulates all the mana to manifest a large, dark spirit bomb, the Mortal Dark Sphere, which can destroy everything in its radius. He throws the blast at Lloyd, but it vanishes even before reaching him. Gizarm starts losing his mind, yelling about where his blast went. Lloyd explains that he erased it by using a similar technique. He reveals that he can also use a spell called Void, and he's quite experienced with this power. Gizarm continues to rant about how he is more powerful than any human, but his uncontrollable yapping stops when Lloyd sneezes wildly. This makes Gizarm even more furious and prompts him to attack. He touches Lloyd's head, but he freezes, feeling and seeing Lloyd's true aura, which makes him start sweating. Lloyd asks Gizarm if hitting him with Void would slay him. Gizarm tries to escape, but Lloyd hits him with multiple voids. Meanwhile, Albert and Dian are fighting demons alongside Shiro and Silpha. Ren helps them with her poison, but warns that she doesn't have perfect control over her power. Albert feels that something is off, realizing that the sun isn't rising, despite it being almost daytime. Back to Gizarm and Lloyd. A huge void, created by Lloyd, is swallowing Gizarm. He tries to flee by escaping Jade's body, but he is unable to. He then tries to act like Jade is back to his senses and begins begging Lloyd to stop the attack. Lloyd recognizes that Gizarm is trying to perform a skit to catch him off guard and slays him instantly without mercy. After this, Lloyd starts to remember Jade. On the other side, the sun finally appears, and Ren begins to remember Jade, who was excited about Lloyd looking up to him and hoping he would pull them out of their curses. Remembering all of this makes her cry. Lloyd sets up a memorial grave for Jade far from the graves of other peasants. He tells Shiro and Grimoire how strong Jade was, and how, with an attentive mind, he fought him. He also reveals that in his last moments, Jade managed to transcribe a complete spell for Shadow Wolf, which is why it wasn't a complete victory for Lloyd. Ren, hiding behind a tree, listens to all of this and tries to muster the courage to tell Lloyd how grateful she is. But Albert appears, going to talk to him. He asks about the grave and Lloyd fumbles in his response. Albert tells him that he knows the story of Jade, that he was a sorcerer, and how a demon controlled his body. Lloyd understands that his crew must have cooked up this story. Diane and the group arrive, and they start listening to the conversation. Albert gives his approval for keeping the grave and praises Lloyd, telling him he's proud of his brother. He discloses that the Assassin's Guild has been taken into custody and that they are looking for Ren to arrest her because of the people they've slayed. The crew says they intend to serve Lloyd as compensation for their crimes. If that's not possible, they will pay the price. Albert asks for Lloyd's decision, keeping him in mind, saying that if they snitch and get stitches, Lloyd will be held responsible. Lloyd takes responsibility for them and is ready to take them under his cover. Albert seems proud of his brother and says that he loves him before starting to act goofy with him. Finally, Tao arrives to save Lloyd, but she's as late as I am to my wife's needs. She sees the atmosphere and understands there is no need for her there, so she runs off. Albert, who still has to thank her for last night, also starts running after her. The Assassin's Guild is freed after Albert's orders, and he invites everyone, including the guild, to a tea party. He serves wine instead of tea, assuming they would prefer it. Talia starts hitting on the prince by offering him a drink, and he suddenly turns into a zesty mess, but he denies the offer. Upset by this, Talia casts a love spell on him, making him drink the wine. After drinking, the prince loses his mind and becomes an angry drunk. Meanwhile, Silpha, Aliezin, and Ren are relaxing in a hot spring elsewhere. Silpha asks Ren to spill the beans and tell her why she followed them here. Ren expresses that she wants to work with Lloyd the same way Silpha does, and how she wants to be with him to express her gratitude and turn the boy into a man in a single night. Silpha tells her to explain this to the prince herself, who is standing right behind her. He replies with a simple, "Sure," which makes Ren go dumb as she wonders why he's in the women's bathhouse. Silpha starts washing Lloyd's man parts, which makes Ren more embarrassed. She asks if Ren has hurt many people and if he is fine with keeping her by his side. He tells her she's wasting her potential and that if she had used her poison correctly, she could have been a pharmacist. When Ren learns that her poison can save people, she gets tears in her eyes. Lloyd orders her to work on her spell. Ren starts crying, thinking that nobody has ever praised her before. She promises Lloyd that she will work on her spells to better the world. Ren walked over to Lloyd's door and knocked, calling out that breakfast was ready. Instead of finding Lloyd, she was greeted by Grim and Shiro. She wished them good morning, but before they could respond, a mysterious voice startled her. Confused and alarmed, she looked around and realized the voice was emanating from the eyes painted on the wall. The voice belonged to Lloyd, who proudly claimed he had finally mastered the skill of concealing his identity, something Ren had once tried to teach him. But Ren, aware of his capabilities, understood that he hadn't merely learned the technique, he had perfected it. When she began addressing him formally, Lloyd reminded her that while in his presence, she need not bother with titles and should simply call him by his name. He questioned why she still hadn't adjusted to the palace customs. Ren explained that Miss Silpha had been particularly strict in training her on palace etiquette and the responsibilities of becoming a maid. Just as she spoke those words, Silpha entered the room without their noticing and firmly stated that such familiarity would not be permitted. Ren must address him as master. Later, as Lloyd bounced on a trampoline net, a group of his friends were gathered around the governor, surprised by his appointment. They expressed disbelief, stating that they had expected Lloyd himself to assume leadership. The governor admitted he had shared the same assumption, but Lloyd approached and clarified that since he was tasked with appointing a new governor, he had chosen him and expected him to protect the kingdom diligently. The governor assured Lloyd that he would fulfill his responsibilities and prevent any further destruction. By this time, Babylon had also joined the group. Amidst their discussions, Grimm proposed an unusual idea, one that had a demonic undertone. He suggested that through learning divine sorcery, they could gain a means to repel demonic attacks. The group was astonished that such a thought had been voiced. Some even mocked Grimm, dismissing him as a mere flying goat. He snapped back, demanding respect, and elaborated that to learn divine sorcery, they would need to join the church, as such power was sanctioned by the divine order. Babylon, who was drinking nearby, scoffed, saying that he had never been interested in gods or salvation. Among them, the most reluctant was Lloyd himself. When questioned about his hesitation, he revealed that 2 years ago he had done something inside the church that resulted in him being permanently expelled. Despite this, the allure of divine sorcery was too great, and he resolved to return. Inside the church, when Lloyd greeted the father, the priest initially welcomed him warmly, pleased to see a young visitor, but upon recognizing Lloyd de Salum, his demeanor shifted dramatically. He accused him of being the devil's butthole and questioned how he dared set foot in the holy grounds. Escher quickly came to his defense, reminding the father of the teachings he preached. If one sincerely repents, God would forgive. Lloyd, she claimed, was truly remorseful. Shiro also leapt in, vouching for Lloyd's sincerity. The father's hostility softened, especially upon seeing Shiro, whom he took an immediate liking to. Using the pretense of divine forgiveness, he decided to give Lloyd a second chance, assigning tasks like cleaning and fundraising to him and the group. However, not even 10 minutes passed before Lloyd accidentally broke one of the father's prized vases. Escher offered to apologize on his behalf, but Lloyd insisted on taking responsibility. He knelt to pick up the broken shards himself. Curious about Lloyd's past, others in the group asked Escher about the real reason behind his expulsion. She revealed that as a child, Lloyd had been obsessed with divine sorcery. When denied access, he foolishly summoned a demonic creature into the church, causing great damage. Though he confessed to his actions, he was cast out. Yet despite all this, she believed he was a good kid at heart. While disposing of the shards, Lloyd heard a commotion nearby. Turning toward the noise, he spotted a girl being harassed by thugs. As he moved closer, he recognized her. It was his sister, Saraya, the fourth princess of Salum and a musical prodigy. Apparently, she had accidentally bumped into one of the thugs and injured him. They now demanded compensation for medical expenses. But when Saraya discovered that none of them had any talent in music, she dismissed them coldly, infuriating them further. They threatened to turn her into a musical instrument as revenge. When Escher stepped in to protect her, she was lifted into the air and her heavenly melons groped. Unable to watch any longer, Ren summoned her mana and used it to transmute a poisonous gas that rendered the thugs unconscious. Unfortunately, the gas also knocked out the father. Exhausted, Ren confessed she was at her limit. Babylon made a move to assist, but Lloyd stopped him. Using Jade's technique, he created a ring and teleported the thugs to a location even he didn't recognize. Escher, now impressed by his strength and maturity, invited him to participate in their upcoming musical recital. But Saraya, aware that Lloyd hadn't practiced in a long time, told him to simply observe. Grimm leaned in and whispered to Lloyd that sometimes a person could generate unique phenomena by manipulating mana signatures. He further explained that rituals, especially when done through song or dance, could produce effects similar to spells, provided the user had enough mana. Babylon added that the recital they were preparing had healing effects. Intrigued, Lloyd quietly observed the performance and found their claims to be true, hoping to understand the magic behind it. Grimm pulled a sword from his mouth and sliced through the air to analyze the mana. What he found was a set of geometric notations resembling the structure of magic spells, similar in effect to healing magic taught in health classes. Suddenly, Lloyd felt a gaze from above. He informed Grimm, who agreed that it was sinister. They excused themselves from the group and used Jade's Shadow Wolf technique to track the source and to investigate, only to find themselves teleported far beyond their intended destination. The air grew colder, and soon, they found themselves in a cloudy, strange place. As they struggled to make sense of their surroundings, Lloyd's eyes locked onto a structure in the distance, a temple with a bell tower. Turning to Grimm, he quietly said he had found the source of the gaze. Meanwhile, Ren was in a state of panic, wondering where Lloyd had disappeared to. Babylon calmly asked what Lloyd had said before leaving. She recalled him mentioning that he had sensed the same gaze again. Babylon, scanning their surroundings, noticed the strange sparkles floating around them. He speculated that these might actually be rain clouds and announced he would go investigate. Ren, already unsettled by Lloyd's absence, felt her anxiety deepen at the thought of Babylon leaving as well. Meanwhile, high above the clouds, Lloyd and Grimm came upon an angel seated on a pulpit, peeping through a ring at Escher and Saraya's performance. The angel muttered about his desire to visit the surface and interact physically with them. When Lloyd called out, the angel was startled, shocked that a human had managed to enter paradise, especially past the barrier separating it from the human world. Upon questioning, the angel introduced himself as Jiriel, acolyte to the 64 deities of Paradisa and a sacred envoy. His demeanor instantly shifted to one of lofty authority, in stark contrast to his earlier lecherous behavior. In a booming voice, he ordered Lloyd and Grimm to return to Earth at once. Ignoring the command, Lloyd asked if Jiriel could teach him divine sorcery. The angel turned away dismissively, telling them to leave. Grimm, losing his temper, reminded Jiriel of the perverse conduct they had just witnessed and demanded he stop boasting. Still unfazed, Jiriel summoned Lux, launching metallic sword-like feathers toward them. Lloyd countered by summoning his sword Spelltaker, skillfully evading the attack, though he quickly realized the feathers were far harder than they appeared. Impressed, Lloyd noted the weapon's craftsmanship. Jiriel, in turn, began to understand that Lloyd was no ordinary human. He increased his barrage, but Lloyd dodged each strike. Turning to Grimm, Lloyd speculated that the Lux swords were produced limitlessly through mana. Determined to test his theory, he cast Shadow Wolf, attempting to teleport Jiriel. The angel narrowly avoided it, secretly rattled by Lloyd's skill, though he hid it behind more arrogant boasts. He declared that Lloyd's tricks could not affect someone with his immense mana. Lloyd, however, decided to reduce the spatial distance between them to make teleportation more effective. On his second attempt, Jiriel escaped again, bragging about his invincibility. Grimm, observing closely, admitted the execution of Shadow Wolf was even better than when Gizarm had once used it against Lloyd. Speaking through a speaker, Grimm warned Jiriel that they had no intention of killing him, urging him to listen to their demands. But the angel continued his self-important act until Lloyd finally grasped the Lux mechanism. Realizing the key was to maintain the spell for as long as possible, Lloyd conjured the largest, nearest Shadow Wolf, which engulfed Jiriel completely, leaving him lying in a transparent, subdued state. Grimm explained that beings like Jiriel, made of mana, revert to mana when defeated. Since Lloyd still needed to learn divine sorcery from him, he revived Jiriel with his own mana. The angel, still unwilling to yield, attempted to trick Lloyd into forming a pact for teaching sorcery, intending to siphon Lloyd's mana and flee to Earth in his body. However, he only managed to absorb a fraction of Lloyd's mana, and ended up transmuting into his hand, realizing just how vast Lloyd's mana reserves were. Grimm burst into laughter at the sight. Resigned, Jiriel explained that divine sorcery required an angel's signature to be bestowed upon a caster, and its power depended on the caster's mana. When Lloyd asked if the signature was necessary for him, Jiriel admitted that, due to their bond, he could cast it without one. Urging Lloyd to try, the angel was stunned when the spell manifested as something massive, so powerful it frightened Grimm, who feared it could devastate the earth. Jiriel, awestruck, recognized it as the 7 wings of an archangel, and together they agreed it must be stopped before causing destruction. Back on Earth, Babylon wandered into the church garden in search of Lloyd as thunder rumbled overhead. A foul, rotten scent filled the air. Before he could place it, a voice behind him warned that he shouldn't be there. Turning, Babylon saw a man who identified himself as a pastor. Babylon noted that the pastor's rosary seemed missing, prompting the man to pull one out to show him. At that moment, Ren arrived on Shiro, announcing that the recital was nearly over. The pastor complimented Shiro's fur, but the creature grew uneasy in his presence. As the pastor began casting a spell on Shiro, Lloyd suddenly appeared, intercepting it. The group returned to the church. When Escher asked Lloyd how the recital had been, he told her it was good from start to finish, but she pointed out that it had been called off due to thunder. Lloyd then informed the priest that he would be leaving the church from that day onward. Babylon, overhearing, reasoned that Lloyd's purpose in coming to the church must have been fulfilled, so there was no cause for concern. In the garden, however, the mysterious pastor was busy digging into the earth. From the hole, an arm emerged. Speaking to it, the pastor remarked that security would need to be increased now. After returning from the church, they arrived at Lordost, where Lloyd asked Jiriel to bless everyone present with divine sorcery. Though reluctant, Jiriel complied, granting them weapons infused with divine sorcery. He protested, however, that he had only promised to teach Lloyd and not the others. Later, as Lloyd and the rest enjoyed tea, he suggested that Jiriel take a form similar to Grimm. The request visibly irritated Jiriel, but when Grimm provoked him, implying he could not do it in the first place, Jiriel transformed into a bird out of sheer pride. When Lordost's men entered to greet their boss, they were enraged upon finding a devil spawn in the room. However, once placed under a spell, they transformed into subdued, apologetic figures. Curious, Jiriel asked what they were apologizing for, and was told they regretted groping Escher and Saria in the past. This revelation filled Jiriel with fury, and it took great effort to calm him. Soon after, they departed for the castle. Jiriel was enthralled by its grandeur, deeming it worthy of a 7th prince. Inside, a doppelganger of Lloyd appeared, startling Jiriel as he tried to discern the real one. Ren explained it was merely a puppet used when Lloyd was away on missions. Amazed, Jiriel approached it, only for Grimm to warn him of its precious value. As they relaxed, having tea on the bed, Lloyd revealed his plan to test the divine sorcery by hunting ghouls. Their discussion was interrupted by a knock at the door, prompting Jiriel and Grimm to hide. It was Silpha. After greetings, she inquired about Babylon and was told he remained at the church. Lloyd privately thought he had been left to clean up his mess after cooking with the divine, sorcery-infused knife. Lloyd then invited Silpha to join their ghoul hunting mission, to which she readily agreed, unaware of Jiriel's lingering gaze. They set off toward town, with Silpha describing various locations along the way. On the bridge, while others admired its size, she identified it as the Great Dean Bridge, the linchpin of east-to-west traffic and a hotspot for ghoul sightings. Lloyd noted he could not use his spectral detection here. Further ahead, they encountered Escher and Saria, who claimed they were there for pancakes. Ren reminded them of their mission, though she knew Lloyd could be swayed. True enough, he eagerly agreed to stop for pancakes, comparing their taste to magic. When Escher asked about their purpose, they explained they were after ghouls. After eating, they resumed their mission. While the others found it hard to believe ghouls lurked near the bridge, Lloyd advised them to look toward the sewers instead of upward. Upon reaching the sewers, Silpha and Ren admitted that they could not stand the smell. Silpha asked how Lloyd knew about the missing adventurers, and he explained he had sent a party member to investigate. At that moment, a Tau appeared and hugged Lloyd. When he asked about her search, she complained that the foul stench made it impossible to use her spectral detection. Lloyd insisted they proceed, casting the Helio spell to brighten and purify the area, making it more bearable. Tau expressed her gratitude, saying the purification allowed her to channel Chi, though she found her new uniform uncomfortably tight around the chest. Even with her Chi-enhanced spectral detection, the ghouls remained elusive. Finally, Lloyd, channeling Chi through his breath, spotted them. To add excitement, Tau proposed a game. Whoever killed the most ghouls would win a date with Lloyd. Silpha objected, insisting their goal was to test the divine sorcery, but Ren secretly entertained the idea. Lloyd armed each of them with the divine sorcery-infused weapons. Tau went first, swiftly killing nearly 10 ghouls. Not to be outdone, Silpha put Tau aside and attacked with her skills, engaging in a fierce competition. Their playful rivalry turned heated as they sought Lloyd's favor, killing more ghouls along the way. Eventually, their weapons wore out, and they returned to Lloyd for more. Ren, who had been observing quietly, decided to join the fray. When her attacks proved less effective, she infused her weapon with poison, which disrupted the divine sorcery and broke it. This mishap, however, gave Lloyd new ideas for improvement. He innovated and upgraded the weapons, impressing Grimm, who noted that divine sorcery had always been used to purify evil but had never been evolved until now. With only 2 ghouls remaining, Tau, Silpha, and Ren, having already slain 23 each, charged forward to finish the hunt, but before they could strike, an unusual force hurled them away. Lloyd turned sharply to see the cause. Meanwhile, at the church, the mysterious pastor was strangling the father, chastising him for being unaware of the civil war raging in his own country. Speaking to a wraith, he remarked that the father's body would serve perfectly for their mission. At that moment, Escher entered, prompting the pastor to smirk, declaring he would not mind acquiring another fresh body for his purposes. Back in the sewers, all 3 were stunned, unable to comprehend what had sent them tumbling down at the same time. They were badly injured, with blood streaking down the heads of Silpha and Tau. They tried to attack again but were hurled back by threads once more. The situation was quickly turning grim. Meanwhile, in the church, as the wraith suggested taking Escher's body and prepared to attack her, Babylon descended from above, striking with blades of divine sorcery and stopping the pastor from strangling her. The pastor then revealed his true form, grotesque, with a mass of writhing tentacles. Babylon told him there was something he wanted to show, but the pastor replied that he feared there could be nothing. Back under the bridge, Lloyd, who had been quietly observing, caught one of the threads to examine it and realized it was a thin bone. The moment he touched it, his body froze. At that instant, Ren recognized what they were facing: the blighted neuron. She recalled a time long ago when, over drinks at a pub, a friend read from the newspaper about a blighted child, born in a small province whose body produced endless spinal threads made from mana. These threads, when in contact with someone's limbs, could interfere with motor nerves and override brain commands. Wrapped around his skin, they carried a mana signature for evasion and counterattack. The boy had no control over his body and was sent into battle to quell a civil war, only to be thrown into the sea at the end. Somehow, he had returned to life. Now understanding the threat, they struck again, believing the number of threads was manageable. However, the Blighted exuded so many spinal threads that they were hurled back yet again. Ren then infused her hands with poison. The others warned her that poison would not affect a ghoul, but to their surprise, the Blighted froze in his tracks. Lloyd explained that Ren had used neurotoxin, which paralyzed the body, and because his spinal threads were connected to his nervous system, he was immobilized. She urged them to use this moment, but as Tao lunged, she narrowly avoided one bone thread that had been shaped into a saw. Ren called on them to finish it. Tao unleashed 100 Flowers, Fist, Wrecking Wheels, while Silpha employed House of Langless, Dual Bladecraft, Lion Roar. The three struck together, subduing the Blighted instantly and sending his body crashing far away. As he fled, he thought of meeting these adventurers another time, and of his master, who must still be at the church. He considered going to the surface to live for a while. Tao remarked on the Blighted's thread-producing ability, while Silpha noted that, although they are said to lack control over their will, this one seemed to possess a strong will. Tao added that something was amiss about him, and that they should finish him now. As he ran, Lloyd flicked his fingers and severed the Blighted's foot. Shocked and in agony, the Blighted reflected bitterly that his life had been nothing but suffering, abused and tortured from youth until death, then turned into a wraith. Though wraiths could occupy other bodies, they could only do so if the host spirit was weaker, making his revenge difficult. Then he met his master, who gave him this body after much struggle. It had accepted him instantly. When asked what to do with it, his master told him to do as he pleased. After killing his tormentors, he had no further plans, a fact his master may have foreseen. When he returned, the master welcomed him, something that had never happened before. But earlier, when he contacted Lloyd through the spinal threads, he had sensed something strange. This small boy could produce a staggering amount of mana. Now he begged for his life. Lloyd channeled his powers and struck. The Blighted thought it was as if the 7 hands of the goddesses were upon him. He pleaded for mercy, but Lloyd subdued him and caught him in the palm of a hand he had summoned. Deciding to take him along, Lloyd, when asked by Grimm where he would put him, replied, "What is Lordost for?" He extended his hand to the Blighted, who was overwhelmed. No one had ever treated him kindly before. Yet it was too late. Inside him lay the Luma Maxima, which he had once swallowed at his master's instruction. His master had told him that when it shattered, both body and ethereal being would be destroyed. It now burst, and Grimm, unable to withstand that much divine sorcery, fell. Juriel was astonished that someone could cast such an advanced divine spell, as few knew of Luma Maxima. At that moment, in the church, the pastor froze briefly, as rain poured heavily outside. Babylon told Escher to take Father to the Adventurers Guild, but warned her not to seek help. No one could fight this pastor. He considered running too, but the pastor regained consciousness and demanded to know where the girl was. Ignoring the question, Babylon asked if he was a monster. The pastor said it was a long story, but when pressed, he dismissed it as unimportant as he intended to kill him. One tentacle hurled Babylon into the air. Babylon then remembered his last conversation with Lloyd, who had asked him to clean up his mess at the church and had sensed something unusual about the pastor. Babylon had dismissed it as imagination, but Lloyd insisted that everything in this world was tied to magic, buffing Babylon with his finger. Now, facing the pastor, Babylon felt bold and brave, perhaps due to the lack of bloodlust from his foe, or perhaps because of Lloyd's buff. Even so, he knew he could not restrain the man for long, and decided to use a purifying spell. His mana was insufficient to cast it fully, but by casting it perpetually, he could conceal his position, though it left his heart exposed. A piercing tentacle found its mark, striking his heart and sending him falling. The pastor told him he had warned there was nothing to show him, then departed, while Lloyd and the others stood beneath the bridge, watching the rain fall. Babylon suddenly sprang up, strangling the pastor around the neck. He told the pastor he had still more to show, musing aloud about the flexibility of his own body, how he could easily break his bones and rearrange vulnerable internal organs elsewhere inside himself, a grotesque ability that had saved him from being killed countless times. Still gripping tightly, Babylon struck the pastor again and again, his fury unrelenting. When it seemed the pastor had been subdued, the pastor lashed out once more with one of his tentacles, sending the man tumbling into the main hall of the church. The pastor mocked him, saying Babylon never stood a chance. Still, he admitted to being impressed by Babylon's resilience. He pondered aloud where to strike to finally kill him, and, revealing his favorite spell, Luxa, as he summoned a barrage of swords. With all of them, he struck Babylon and disappeared, leaving the church in silence. Back at the Adventurers Guild, there was commotion as many adventurers returned, soaked from the rain. Katerina begrudgingly handed out towels, muttering complaints all the while. Escher entered then, dragging the unconscious father over her shoulder. An adventurer immediately asked what had happened, offering assistance at no cost, but Escher lied, claiming the father had fallen and injured himself. Without waiting for more questions, she hurried off again. Running through the rain, Escher struggled with her thoughts. She considered asking the others for help. They were strong, but deep down she remembered the promise she made to Babylon. She knew if she brought others into this, they would have died. Desperate, she prayed to God for strength to save him, recalling what Surya once told her, that her voice, when raised in prayer, had the power to reach the heavens and heal. She prayed earnestly until her hope began to slip away. Then suddenly, someone held an umbrella over her. She looked up to see Lloyd, calm and composed. He praised the spell she had cast. It was what brought him to her. He mentioned that the others had gone to buy raincoats and that they would soon return to the church. Escher clung to his leg, begging him to help Babylon, but then hesitated, trying to hide the truth. Still, it was too late. Lloyd had already teleported to where Babylon lay. He brought him back, severely wounded. While unconscious, Babylon relived his past, how he had once told Lloyd about how his life was shit before joining him, and how those he had once loved now surrounded him in distorted memories. Just as the darkness threatened to consume him, he began to hear a song, Escher's voice. At first, he thought it was just another memory, but then his eyes opened. She was really there, singing by his bedside. She shrieked with joy that he had awakened and called for the others. They all gathered around him, eyes teary and hearts filled with relief. Disoriented, Babylon asked what had happened. They told him that 3 days ago, after being critically injured, Lloyd brought him there. Since then, Escher had been casting purification spells on him non-stop. Lloyd and Juriel had been doing the same for 10 hours each day. Lloyd also took measures to investigate, assigning others to look into the church attack and mend the damage. When Babylon asked about Lloyd's whereabouts, Galilea began to speak ominously. But before he could finish, Lloyd appeared, saying that if Babylon hadn't awakened soon, he would have been forced to try an experimental awakening spell, something that clearly shocked Babylon. Sitting upright, Babylon recounted everything, how the attack had unfolded, the pastor's strange power, and how he had used Luxa at the end. Father also described how he had been strangled. Juriel, aghast, questioned how such a monster could wield divine sorcery. Lloyd, turning on his detective mode and considering everything, concluded that the root of the problem lay somewhere in the interior garden of the church. They all went there, finding that others had already begun repairing the damage. Katerina met them there, visibly distraught. She confessed that she had tried to report the suspicious pastor to the Pope, only to be rebuked and asked to bring evidence if she wished to accuse the church. Humiliated, she began to question whether joining the Adventurers Guild had been a mistake. In frustration, she crashed herself into a window. Though Galilea's men tried to protest, Lloyd's feel-good spell calmed them. Lloyd then instructed Galilea to dig into the garden. He noted aloud that even Shiro, who had a keen sense of smell, was too frightened to be of help. An ominous sign. Soon, Saria arrived with Ren and Silpha. Escher rushed to Saria, only to have her soft melons played like a piano by Saria. Crow then summoned his crows and spoke to them in their language, asking them to sniff out any place in the ground that had a foul scent. The crows found something. Silpha pried open the area they pointed to and uncovered a hidden door, stunning everyone. Lloyd explained that it was made of a special plywood that masked both mana and chi, which was why it had gone undetected until now. He descended first. When Escher tried to follow, Babylon protested, not wanting her to go into danger. Battalia, unwilling to see her restricted, pulled him away. She hesitated at first, but then, provoked by the situation, entered too. Inside, they were all stunned into silence. Before them, in rows, floated bodies, suspended in greenish liquid encased in tubes. The basement was cold, eerie, and silent, the air thick with the weight of a sinister secret long hidden. Silpha's voice broke the silence as she hesitantly wondered aloud if these could be monsters. Galilea, pointing to a different set of vials, told them there were humans as well. Ren's gaze fell on one vial, containing a stitched-up ghoul, and she asked whether these might be the same creatures they had fought in the sewers. Silpha agreed, noting that it appeared the process of chimerization was taking place here. The realization filled them all with disgust. Lloyd, who had been silent until now, finally spoke, explaining that this process had little to do with magic and was instead an alchemy-induced experiment. Whoever was behind this had taken cells from living organisms and cultivated entire limbs from them. In other words, chimeras. The thought was repulsive to everyone present. Silpha remarked that she had always known Prince Albert was familiar with alchemy, but had never imagined Lloyd possessed such depth of knowledge. Lloyd clarified that he had merely read about it. A sudden commotion from behind interrupted them. Crow leapt forward, ordering the creature ahead to stand down. Emerging from the shadows came a figure with the body of a girl, but bearing a long, scaled tail. Escher murmured in disbelief, "Is this a Lamia?" Galileo was appalled that someone would unleash a monster here, but Lloyd corrected him. She was human. The revelation shocked them even more. The perpetrator had desecrated human lives in the most grotesque way. Lloyd told Crow not to kill her. Crow acknowledged with a thumbs up and cast an air class spell, Ventre Ciel. Lloyd then called upon Galilea to cast a Russian cocoon, while Ren stepped forward to strike. The monstrous girl deflected her attack, but Crow, using monofocus and recitation loop, finally forced her to kneel. The group was awed by the display of mana control and relieved that such power was on their side. Yet, the Lamia rose again, ready to attack. Escher stopped the crow and approached her herself, attempting to calm the girl, only to be met with sudden aggression. But then, something strange happened. A soft melody began to drift through the air, sung by Soraya. The song stirred memories for the others, reminding them of when Babylon lay unconscious and Escher had sung to him for more than 12 hours straight. Even after her mana was depleted, the girl's movement slowed and she began to sing as well. Recognition dawned on her. The voice was the same one she had heard while the pastor experimented on her. The one that kept her from losing her sanity completely. The sound had even been strong enough to halt the pastor's actions. Stopping her attack, she whispered, "I'm a human." Escher embraced her, apologizing for not knowing such horrors were unfolding beneath their feet. They returned to the surface where Prince Albert was waiting. He told them his priority was to track down the pastor as soon as possible. The girl apologized, saying she could not be of much help. She remembered nothing. Lloyd reassured her that this was natural, as one side effect of chimerization was amnesia. She handed over a rosary she had found in the basement. Lloyd told her she could help herself by using the notes he had taken from the pastor's hideout before they destroyed it. Perhaps she could find a way to return to her original form and then burn the records. She asked where she could possibly go in her condition, but Galilea assured her that their island was open to everyone and she would be welcome there. Crow then showed her a special technique that allowed her to hide her tail. Escher soon rushed to the church, fearing Soraya might have left the castle, but found her calmly sipping tea with Babylon's Macrons. When asked why she was still there, Soraya explained she was taking a break between recital practices. Escher told her she would join her in singing, as it was the only thing she was truly good at. The others soon arrived, and Prince Albert confided that he was considering canceling the Great Advent Festival due to the threat posed by the mysterious pastor. This suggestion was met with immediate protest. He could not simply call it off. Albert explained that he did not know how to make the announcement without attracting fierce criticism. Attention turned to the rosary. It was solid gold, unlike the silver ones Escher and Babylon possessed. Babylon recalled that the pastor had shown him a brand new rosary when asked about it, suggesting he had lost the one now in their possession. Silpha observed that the situation was far more serious than they had imagined. Babylon added that the pastor had definitely used divine sorcery, though only as a preliminary act before rituals, something that required a special pass. The father was enraged, pointing out that only the Pope and 11 bishops could wield such power. Juriel confirmed that no one had been granted such authority except Pope Kitan, who then blessed the 11 bishops. Beyond them, Lloyd had been blessed, and in turn, he had blessed 4 of his companions, people he trusted completely. The father realized that the culprit must be one of the bishops, and that the reason they had not recognized him earlier was due to the shape-shifting ability Babylon had mentioned. Albert concluded that despite all they had learned, they could not cancel the Great Advent Festival, but this knowledge proved that the Pope was in danger. They proposed offering security to the Pope, which would allow them to keep an eye on the bishops and prevent any assassination attempt. Prince Albert dispatched a letter to the Pope, but before it reached its destination, Bishop Anastasia intercepted it. She told a churchwoman she would deliver it, but upon opening it, she smirked. Instead of taking it to the Pope, she made her way to a secret lair, where she handed it to the pastor. She explained that the letter revealed that they had learned little from the information extracted from the Lamia. The pastor dismissed the concern, claiming that even if Prince Albert knew of his plan, it would change nothing. Both he and Lloyd's group, in their separate quarters, prepared for what was to come. As the pastor muttered with a twisted smile, and Lloyd's allies steeled themselves, the curtain was set to rise on the Great Advent Festival, and the war looming behind it. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to smash the like and subscribe buttons. Hit the bell icon to stay tuned in for the next. Until next time, stay thirsty, my fellas.